And for our audience, thanks for coming. We've established ground rules ahead of time, which are that each candidate gets to talk for 2 minutes, and we'll start with the candidate that drew number 1, which is
design.
Okay, Romney. And I came up with some questions, but I also want to let the audience know ahead of time that you will be able to ask one question. One person will be able to ask one question that you're dying to ask.
Dave will give a good one.
Governor Romney and President Obama. But I will start out first, and we'll keep good track of time. And the first question then goes to Governor Romney. And here it is. If you were elected president of the US and were to meet with German Chancellor Angela Merkel the day following your inauguration, what would be your top 3 priorities for this meeting and why?
Wow. First, I'd like to say thank you, Dr. Weber, for organizing this this illustrious event. Welcome to all of you here in the crowd, and then welcome to Mr. President as well. I think we've had a long campaign road, and it's I guess in a few hours it's coming to an end. But yes, we're debating nonetheless. To address your question, you said that if I were to meet with Chancellor Angela Merkel of Germany, initially my first concern, needless to say, the European debt crisis is something that has been an issue that has dominated the news. So I think that the first issues or the major concern that we talk about is the ways that the United States as well as Germany can work together to see if we can again work across the Atlantic to kind of work to solve these issues. Secondly, Germany. Germany in Europe, speaking anyway, Germany is one of our strongest allies. So again, the maintenance of the strategic relationship between the United States and Germany would also be the second largest concern. And then moving forward from that, the third point anyway would be again sort of the further maintenance, not just necessarily in terms of military or strategic importance, but then also economic importance between the U.S. and Germany as well.
First of all, Dr. Weber, I'd like to thank you for moderating this debate. Very fortunate that you were able to come and spend your time doing this. And I'd like to thank my opponent, Governor Romney, for also participating. I enjoyed meeting him again a few hours before the polls open and the American people decide. I would have to say that I agree on the first 2 points with Governor Romney. I think the EU crisis is very important, especially with Greece and their financial problems. The European Union, Germany, contains several nations that we are...
It's Anne, I'm sorry.
Wives. But the European Union contains several nations that we have good partnerships with, and we would want to continue these partnerships. Germany, France, the United Kingdom, among those. And it's very important that we continue those partnerships. And that the U.S. determines how they could work with Germany to help alleviate the crisis in any way. Obviously, this is a European issue, and there's only so much the U.S. can do, but we want to do everything in our power to help our partners and allies. Number 2, the general German-U.S. relationship. We have a good relationship, a good economic relationship, good business relationship. We would definitely discuss that, discuss how that could be strengthened in the future, discuss how we could further grow ties, because we are always interested in growing ties with our partners and allies. But also discussing, I think it was important to discuss the section of the world, Eastern and Central Europe, the problems that could arise in the future, the strategic issues. My administration does not anticipate any problems with Russia, but in the past decade or so, the increased severity of their ties to, or their aggressiveness needs to be discussed with Germany and with others in the region.
Okay, thank you, President Obama. So the next question will actually go to you again. Here it is. Southeast Asia has become an increasingly important political and economic player in global politics. Yet we've heard little from either of you with respect to any of the countries in the region. Certainly there have been really important changes with respect to Burma, Myanmar recently that it seems deserve U.S. attention. Please outline your vision regarding future U.S. relations with this country.
It's important for my administration and for the United States as a whole in the near future to be allies and partners with several countries in the Southeast Asia region. We need to be able to show that we are indeed still a Pacific power. China is a potential partner, but they also are currently an adversary of the United States. They are undervaluing their currency. They are not playing by the same rules as anyone else. And that's a problem. China has used its growth and its military strength to essentially dominate or attempt to dominate the region. And it's important that with all Southeast Asian nations, that the United States shows that we are capable of countering that aggression, any future aggression. Now, this is not to say that I would put us on a collision course with China. I don't want that. I don't think China wants that. I don't think anyone in the region wants that. The important thing to do is to know and to be able to project our power to the point where we can offer all these nations, Burma, Myanmar being one of them, the assurance that the United States looks out for your interests. We look out for the interest of the smaller nations. We want them to grow. We want them to be able to succeed. And we want them to be able to not be constrained by any powers in the region that might compete or try to dominate the area. We don't want a U.S. dominance of the Pacific arena at all. I think that would be overstretching our boundaries. But we do want to maintain a free and open area for trade and other forms of commerce.
Thank you, President. Governor Romney.
Dr. Baber, I'd say that Mr. President has made a few important points that I do agree with. First of all, saying that we do need to maintain the strategic relationship and allied partners with countries such as Myanmar, Burma, and Southeast Asia. But I think that the second part of the President's statement is somewhat contradictory, and in the next few moments I'm going to do my best to explain why. Mr. President, you mentioned this idea of power, this idea of projecting the fact, or the idea that the United States can protect across the Atlantic, protect across the Pacific and all areas of the world. Yet, in past years and the months leading up to this campaign, the President has spoken much of a reduction of military spending all over the world, a reduction of American power, and a reduction of the way that countries view the power and potential of the United States of America. Mr. President has spoken a lot about the protection of interests of other small nations such as Myanmar, Burma, but then I think that in the reduction of the potential to portray power in other parts of the world, Mr. President's plan does well to reduce the interest here at home in the United States, which is something that hasn't been new to the president here. Since the president has taken office, we've had an unemployment rate over 8% for a number of months now. It just recently went down to 7.9%. It is below 8%, but still relatively high. When this is a president who, keeping in mind the interest of the American people, said that unemployment rate wouldn't go over 5%. Again, so not to sort of tie in domestic issues with foreign policy. Again, I do agree with the president in saying that we do need to be tougher on China. China has devalued their currency. China has devalued their currency, and I do agree with the president in that regard. But I do also think that the president's plan to project power in other parts of the world, or him saying projecting power in other parts of the world, doesn't necessarily meet up with his plan.
Do I get to counter? To answer that?
Sure.
Okay. Well, Governor Romney, and there's a few points that I need to address. Number one, when you're talking about military spending, I'm not reducing military spending. I'm just keeping it where it is. We're emphasizing technological quality, technological advancement over the quantity. It's no longer like we're playing a game of Risk, where we just have whoever has the most pieces on the board wins. I still want us to be able to project our power and influence with less, which we can do where the technology is going. I'm asking our Defense Department, our Secretary of Defense, what we need to be safe, what we need to ensure our interests, and that's where these are coming from. The second aspect of what you're talking about, going to domestic, and I understand that this is a foreign policy debate, but when we're talking about domestic, look, you have to understand the economy as it stood when I became president was in shambles. It was just about to it had taken a nosedive and was about to take another one. Promises were made, expectations were made, and those expectations might have proven to be incorrect. But if you ask anyone today, are you better off now than you were in 2008, when we had to do the stimulus package, when we had to bail out the banks, when we had to bail out the auto industry? They would say unequivocally, yes. And when it comes to China, I have to contradict your previous statements on China.
President Obama, we need to move on, so 5 more seconds.
You basically have said, when we first wanted to talk about China and try to protect our tire industry because they're making cheap tires, you called that protectionist. You said that we shouldn't do that, we shouldn't try to do that, and we did it, and my plan saved American jobs, which you disagreed with.
Okay, since our audience would like to hear your opinion on a few other issues, we move on. Next question goes to Governor Romney. Which country would you visit first if elected president, and why? What would you hope to accomplish with this visit?
Well, Dr. Baby, that in itself is an extremely easy question to answer. And when I'm elected president of the United States, my first trip will be to Israel. Needless to say, Israel is one of, if not our most important strategic partner in the Middle East region. And again, throughout this campaign, we've touched upon this idea of the lack of leadership that the president has shown or not shown in regards to the Middle East and other regions. Here we are 4 years later after the president was elected, and Iran is steps closer to a nuclear weapon. Leaders from the Middle East and all other parts of the world came to the United States to meet at the UN in New York, and Mr. President, our leader, failed to meet with the leader of Israel, one of our most important strategic partners. So again, the president speaks of leadership and projecting power in all parts of the world, but his actions thus far have not agreed with that statement. So, to bring it full circle, I'd visit Israel to again strengthen and reassure our strategic partnership with our most valuable ally in the region.
To say that my policy towards Iran has been anything but strong and single-minded is to deliberately manipulate the truth.
Oh, I didn't say that.
Excuse me, you'll get a turn in a second. Iran is a very, it's a very dangerous, I agree, we should not allow Iran to be able to have a nuclear weapon. Okay. We have worked with them, we have sanctions. The most crippling sanctions in history in Iran have been applied over the past 4 years under my administration. Their economy is in shambles. Their currency has fallen by 80%. Their oil production is the lowest it has ever been. Iran is in a crisis with their economy. But I've never said that we should stop there. And I do not say now that we should stop there. Again, Iran cannot be allowed to gain a nuclear weapon. It would destabilize the region, and it would bring a nuclear power whose intentions are unclear. Iran, I do not take anything off of the table. I believe that if we must resort to military action, I leave that option on the table. But I do not want to rush into another conflict. I don't want to rush into another war without first going through all the other options. Iran will not be allowed to gain a nuclear weapon. That is a promise that I will make. I will do whatever it takes to stop that from happening. But we cannot rush prematurely into another open conflict without going through the options presented before us before that.
So I think, Dr. Raven, this is yet another example of the lack of leadership in regards to foreign policy. Here we have another example where our president is stating that all options are on the table. We don't want to rush into an open conflict, yet all options are on the table. As a leader, it's the president's job to control a potentially nuclear Iranian state by being very clear about his intentions, essentially drawing the line in the proverbial sand, which the president continues to fail to do. So, again, to address the moderator's initial question about why it is that I would go back and visit Israel within the first week of let that be my first visit in office, is to show Israel and by extension show the rest of the world that the United States is ready with a well-defined position in the sand, so to speak, about our feelings about a non-nuclear Iranian state.
I'm confused as to how my statement. Just a few seconds. A few seconds. The floor
is not yours. Let me.
Okay. Just I'm just confused at how by drawing a line in the sand by saying I'm not drawing a line in the sand by saying Iran will not get a nuclear weapon.
I will follow up with the question on Israel. Hopefully, both of you will get an opportunity to then express your thoughts on this topic. So here it goes, and the floor will be yours, President Obama. If Israel were to attack Iran's nuclear facilities to preempt an attack on itself, what would you do as President of the U.S.? Please outline your first 3 steps.
Now, obviously, if I believe in maintaining a relationship with Israel, where this sort of thing would not be a phone call at 3 in the morning with the Prime Minister calling me and saying, you know, we're attacking. What is the United States going to do about it? I believe in maintaining a relationship with Israel where they tell us before they plan to. They tell us that they're planning to do it before they do. And obviously my first method, my first objective would be to understand the intelligence they're working on. Several things have happened that the United States and other nations have done on poor intelligence. I don't want to make a mistake like that. Like I said, I'm not ruling out military options, but I do want to make sure that we know exactly what we're getting into. The second thing I would do after we review the intelligence is talk to both the government and the military leaders and talk about their more specific plans. What are they attempting to do? How are they using that intelligence? What are they attacking? Where are they going? And the third thing I would do is if these first, and obviously the way I'm outlining this is if one of these conditions is not met, we don't go. If the intelligence is not sufficient, we have to tell Israel, we don't need to do this. Now, if Israel brings me intelligence, I am almost certain that intelligence will be complete. It will be sufficient to allow for that. But we would have to coordinate. But again, this is a hypothetical situation. This is a situation where it's just, it's we can lay out plans, but it's very difficult to determine exactly how it would actually go. But that would be essentially my, in a perfect world, if you will, that would be my step-by-step analysis of how to deal with that situation. We've got to run in and make sure that everything's in line, but we've got to maintain a firm resolve.
Mr. President, Governor Romney.
Well, Dr. Weber, I would say that the president has done a good job of bringing up some of the strategic difficulties of this hypothetical situation. As the president stated, first of all, the first question would be intelligence. That being to address your question of steps, is to review the sources of intelligence that we're receiving. As the president said, there's been plenty of examples in U.S. history, world history, and recent history in which the intelligence didn't necessarily match up in the way that was in the best interest of the United States of America and others involved. So the first issue would then be to address the intelligence. Also, going along the lines of what the president said, I think it's important to speak with the government officials and military officials there on the ground. Again, the president talks about the importance of a strategic relationship with Israel and the Prime Minister of Israel. Again, but going back to the ways that this apparent relationship has manifested itself in recent months. Again, the Prime Minister of Israel, as well as other world leaders, came to the United States, came here on our home soil, and the president refused to meet with any of them. So I think that that's something to keep in mind, and then also finally going along with the president as well is sort of presenting the American people intelligence with sort of a broad spread understanding of the issue. Again, it is an if-then situation. If these things happen, then this might happen, and have you. So again, it's difficult to kind of lay hard details down in the ground. But again, I think that these 3 points that we both sort of have agreed on would be the most important and most effective action in the attempt that Israel makes a preemptive strike against Iran.
Governor. The next question then also goes to you again.
The U.S., as a result of a 2011 deficit reduction agreement, could face an automatic federal budget cut of more than $100 billion at the end of the year if there is no compromise agreement with Republicans. If these cuts were to be made in the foreign policy sector rather than the domestic politics sector, what would you cut and why?
So let me first address, before going and addressing the foreign policy aspect of it, let me sort of bring it roundabout and address this sort of concept of the lack of leadership that we've seen with the president here in office. You mentioned that the Republican Party has essentially sort of stood as a rock in the doorway, so to speak, in regards to passing legislation that would prevent this $100 billion deficit reduction or budget reduction. While I was governor of Massachusetts, I had an 87% legislature full of Democrats. But with that said, I was able to reach across the lines and get things done in my state. This president has not shown that he has the ability to do that with Congress, and I think that this is one of many examples of that point. But again, to address your initial question about where I'd reduce military spending, I think that we don't agree very often. But one of the things that we do agree about is this notion of essentially the strategic reduction of troops in the Middle East region. The president and I both come out publicly and said that the plan, for example, in Afghanistan, is to bring troops home by 2014. So I think that in the event that the budget reduction does come about, I think that what we have to do is again retake some of the money that's used in some of those programs that aren't necessarily being as effective as the president might have thought that they would have been, and take some of that money and take some of those funds and redirect them back here at home to invest in America, create American jobs, something that the president has failed to do in his tenure, and again get to a balanced budget. So in the event, that's what I would do.
Well,
Thank you, Governor Romney. Mr. President?
first, Governor Romney, the allegation that I have not worked with Republicans in Congress is absolutely not true. I have worked very tirelessly in an attempt to reach out to them. It is them who wish to block what we're doing. They are being, they don't want to play ball. And I can only try so hard to reach out. Now,
Mr. President,
look, you'll get a chance to respond. You'll get a chance to respond.
You're not just a strategic player in this. You're the president of the United States of America.
Listen,
while I was governor of Massachusetts,
we have to.
Governor Romney, I will give you 30 seconds.
I apologize.
So that first is not true. The second part is to discuss the allegations. First of all, when it comes to troops in being still in the Middle East, I'm glad we agree now, because we haven't always. You said we should have gone to Iraq. You said we should still have 20,000 troops there, and now you've changed your mind. You also were for a timeline, and then against the timeline, and then said maybe on a timeline. Now you're for a timeline again, and so you just got to have the consistency. In response to the third response, when you say I didn't create jobs, I saved many jobs. I went just with, when we talked about earlier, the tire problems with China, when China was creating cheap tires and undercutting us. I went to bat for the American people, and our administration won and was able to save those jobs. And that's just one example.
Yeah, for the past 4 years,
well, I still haven't answered Dr. Weber's question. She said you get 30 seconds.
If that's a president going to bat for the American people, then we need a designated hitter.
Well, can't we understand that he has interrupted me a couple of times? Just 10 more seconds. Okay, thank you. But to answer your question initially, when it comes to the international cuts, the cuts in foreign policy, the defense cuts that we're talking about, that I say are absolutely necessary, they're not defense cuts. Everyone keeps calling them defense cuts. They're actually reduction of projected defense increases. We're just keeping the military where it is. We're emphasizing quality over quantity. We're not downgrading American power. We're not removing our ability to be where we need to be. We're simply translating it into a more effective, more cost-effective, more battle-effective, more field-effective way of doing things. And that is where I would start with the budget cuts.
Thank you, Mr. President. Governor Romney, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
I find it interesting that the president speaks about the maintenance of the protection of power of the United States of America, and saying that the U.S. is not in any way reducing its ability to hit its proverbial targets per se. But this is the same president of the United States of America that, and I'm sure that we'll have a whole section to talk about what is going on or taking place in Libya. That when American lives were at risk and lost, this is the president that went to the Middle East on an apology tour. I'm not quite sure how that projects power.
The apology towards just what
maybe Mr. President might be able to.
That's what we. It's not true.
Mr. President, that was a statement.
That's a miss. You're misconstruing deliberately.
Mr. President.
Okay, Mr. President, Governor Romney, we need to move on to the next question. Maybe you can insert some of these thoughts in your closing remarks. Next question goes to the President. When, in your mind, does the U.S. have the right to interfere in the domestic affairs of other countries, and why?
I'm glad you asked that question. That's a very important distinction to make, and it's very difficult to actually make that. Generally, I believe that countries need to have the sovereign right to exercise their own sovereignty over their territory. I don't think that the United States would want to interfere in the domestic affairs of others in general. I think that generally the idea is we try to keep to each nation having a sovereign sovereignty over their territory. But there does come a time when you do have to consider the option of interference, and that's typically when a dictator or a despot is oppressing and killing his own people. This is an example. This is my administration's, as Governor Romney's pointed out, actions in Libya. In Libya, we were able to go in, absolutely no American troops on the ground, airstrike capabilities, and we were able to topple a dictator who had oppressed his people for decades, who had killed Americans, and who was being obstinate and refused to back down. And we were able to topple that. And that's just an example of when you have to intervene. It's when someone is not only a threat to his own people, but a threat to the region. It's when someone has essentially begun to use their sovereignty to oppress the people living within that country. And that's where you have to draw the line. And it's very difficult. And sometimes it's a case-by-case basis to determine that. But that's generally where I would have to draw the line in the sand.
Thank you. Governor Romney?
Dr. Raby, to address your question, well, first to address a few of the statements made by Mr. President. The President has stated that it's important that in some issues, that it's sometimes on a case-by-case basis, as it were, that it's necessary to intervene in the event that the domestic issues are being curtailed or really destroyed or really affected in a bad manner by a dictator. So, in recent news, the first example that I think about is Syria. I think Mr. President and I both agree on the assumption that we need to remove President Assad. However, going back to one of the initial points and saying that these things take a projection of leadership in the region. These things take a projection of power in the region, and I just don't think that the president's plan aligns with that. Now, again, as the president has stated, in some senses, it is a case-by-case basis. It's not the absolute 100% job of the United States to police the world, so to speak, and look into every single situation, wherever dictatorship or wherever domestic issues may arise. Because not to bring it back to domestic issues, but we have our own domestic issues here at home. As President of the United States, it's your job to keep in the interest those, again, of the world, but then also those of your own country. So in instances where we have over 8% unemployment for months now, that's a separate concern. But again, I think that it is important that as President of the United States, and it is our job to again project that the United States still has the capacity or ability or power to intervene in cases where necessary. But I think that the where necessary clause something that we can sit here and debate about
Governor
all day.
Romney throughout the time. As I indicated earlier, we will allow one question from the audience. And it goes to Governor Romney.
I want to. Okay, cool. Guess I can speak it. So Teddy Roosevelt once said that a person who sheds blood for their country should be given a square deal when they return home. When you think about the $500 billion in defense cuts that are being instituted in January, and additional ones that are being proposed right now, are you going to try to, I guess, implement a policy kind of like Senator Nunn suggested after the Cold War, where they decrease forces, they would decrease forces abroad, but increase them at home? And how do you think the foreign policy would be affected, U.S. foreign policy would be affected abroad?
Actually, that's how did I know your name's Ashley? But that's a great question, and in so many respects, Senator Sam Nunn was one of my favorite politicians across party lines. But you mentioned a great point. This reduction in military spending. It's unfortunate that we have a situation here in the United States, here domestically, where veterans that have served abroad, served for their entire lives, come back to the United States, and they can't even find jobs here at home. We have a president that has promised us that these situations like this wouldn't occur, but yet, we have thousands of veterans out of jobs. But to again address your question, I think that in the instance that the budget cut or the budget reduction were to happen, I would see myself sort of implementing a policy that was again very similar to the one that you have outlined. Not necessarily cutting military spending or reducing it in the strategic manner that the president has suggested, but rather sort of restructuring it so that the specific interests of our veterans that still need their benefits and still need their paychecks from their service to this country in a way that is both cost effective and patriotic in the same breath. Now, in regards to how this may affect foreign policy, I think that's very simple. Again, a theme that I've presented throughout this entire debate is this idea of the projection of military power that the president seems to be putting in jeopardy with talks of strategic reduction. But I think that building up forces here at home, speaks volumes across the seas and saying that the United States still is a preeminent power in this world and still has the effect or has the ability to enact and effect change, wherever we see fit.
Ashley, thank you for your question. It's a very good one. I do, first of all, want to say that when we're talking about veterans, Governor Romney outlined that he would like to do things. I have a track record of doing things for veterans. We've had programs to help veterans get jobs. The economy is extremely rocky. It's still coming up. It's still trying to recover. And we're working on helping that. We're trying to help veterans get health care. This is part of the health care reform that we've passed. And the administration has definitely put veterans, we have a track record of putting veterans at the top of our priorities, because it's very important that the people that go and fight for our freedoms and protect the rights that we have and enjoy as Americans are well taken care of. So I have a track record of doing that, and I will continue to do that. That is a priority. The defense, and I just want to clarify again, these are not defense cuts. These are just lack of defense increases. This will not affect spending on helping veterans get jobs and health care and other benefits. This will not affect that whatsoever. I treat that as a separate matter. and it's important that we continue to do that. But I do want to also stress, Governor Romney, I know that we've talked about the military projection, and you might have forgotten from earlier in the debate when I said that I'm not decreasing their ability to project. I'm merely transferring quantity into quality. We're still going to feel a very high-tech, very able, very capable force. We're talking about capabilities, not just the number of ships that we have out in the field.
Or the number of men manning those ships.
And this is going to be,
or jobs.
this is going to be, Governor, this is going to be a very important part of my future policy, is making sure that we still have the ability to project America. America is the most powerful nation in the world. It's the greatest nation in the world. And I will continue to project that and continue to uphold that so long as I'm president.
All right, one final question to both of you.
This time you will only have 1 minute to answer, and then we'll have closing remarks, and President Obama will go first in the closing remarks. All right, the next question and final question with 1 minute answers. What is your biggest regret during this campaign with respect to foreign policy?
Questions?
What is your biggest regret during this entire campaign with respect to foreign policy remarks you made?
Is this, am I the first one to answer this question, or is this President Obama?
First.
I think if I have to discuss regrets, I think the largest regret would be not maintaining a tighter hold on the bureaucracy post Benghazi. I think that recent reports came out, I believe, yesterday, that discussed how we were operating under intelligence that was incorrect afterwards by administration. Had some, we discussed it. I went out immediately after it happened and in the Rose Garden and called it what it was, a terrorist attack. But afterwards, my administration, other parts of my administration were very confused as to exactly what happened, why it happened. This was in no part of some sort of conspiracy cover-up, like some people have said. This was merely because the bureaucracy didn't have or wasn't getting the information they needed, and if I could go back, I would make sure that I set higher standards for the operations.
Thank you. Governor Romney?
In figuring out what would be my greatest regret in regards to foreign policy, I'm going to be bold and say that this campaign has been run in a strategic manner in which I don't have any regrets. I think that the campaign has highlighted the points that we needed to highlight. The lack there of leadership in regards to the projection of the presidency across the seas. Mr. President has mentioned the issue with the events that have taken place in the wake of the attacks in Benghazi. I have been criticized by my opponent and his constituents in this campaign in saying that in making the statements that I made post the Benghazi attacks, that I was using it for political strife, using it to my political advantage. But those that know, my campaign managers and the American people know that wasn't a political statement. That was a statement expressing the concerns of the American people. The president talks about false information or what have you. I'm almost done.
Please finish your sentence.
Okay. The president speaks of false information regarding the intelligence, but what we do know is that 4 Americans died. And speaking on their behalves at the time that I did is not something that I will ever apologize for.
Thank you. Time for closing remarks, Mr. President. First.
My administration has a track record of putting the people first, putting the people, championing the people that would otherwise not be championed, the middle class, the underprivileged, those in difficult situations, veterans, single mothers, college students, the list goes on. In foreign policy, we have continuously and constantly made clear that America has been the most powerful nation in the world, remains the most powerful nation in the world, and will continue to be the most powerful, most influential, and most decisive nation in the world. Now, will we control everything that happens? No, absolutely not. But America has a very important role to play in Southeast Asia, in Europe, in the Middle East, and in areas that we didn't get to discuss during this debate. We are the leader in the world. We're not the only leader, but we are the most prevalent, and we are the most prominent. And that is a position that we cannot ever forsake, for any reason. My plans are to balance our domestic needs with our foreign policy priorities. I do not now, nor will I ever, advocate for the reduction of the American potential to project power or the American presence in diplomatic and other discussions. It's very important that we continue to interact on this level, and I think that my term and my administration has shown that we are capable of engaging on a variety of fronts: the European Union, China, the rest of the Southeast Asia, Japan, the Middle East, Africa, South America. We are global, and we will strive to maintain that global prominence and that global influence as long as I remain President of the United States.
Mr. President, Governor Romney, your closing remarks.
In closing, I would just first like to say, Dr. Baker, thank you so much for moderating this evening's debate. And thank you, all members of the audience, for your active participation. We don't do this for our own likelies, but rather, despite the bickering here and there, we do it for the American people. With that said, I think that it is extremely important to keep in mind this notion of the projection or the ability to project power of the United States of America in all parts of the globe. For years, for decades, the United States has stood as the preeminent power in this hemisphere of the world, other hemispheres as well. We have strategic partnerships in Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa, Asia, as we've addressed earlier. But I think that it's important that in the next 4 years and the many, many years to come, that the government, the presidency, does not make any steps to reduce that power. Now, yes, we have a lot of issues here at home in the United States. As I mentioned, this isn't a domestic policy debate, but domestic policy is very much tied into foreign policy. Here, we have a situation where we have lots of Americans unemployed, and it's impossible, or not impossible, but extremely difficult to project power across the seas when we have a whole lot of nation building to do here at home. So with that said, it's extremely important that we continue our strategic partnerships, that we not reduce our military presences in other parts of the world, and continue to make the necessary changes needed both domestically and internationally to ensure that the United States continues to be the preeminent power that it has been and will be for many, many years to come. So thank you,
gentlemen.
Thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with us, clarify some of your positions on foreign policy. We wish you well for this evening, and I think I speak for the audience here that we will all eagerly await the election results this evening. So thank you very much.